Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. Today, I am so excited to be talking to a guy that has had close to 15 years experience helping stubborn farmers work better together. He's saved hundreds of family farms from being torn apart by pride and bad decisions. From Stubborn.farm of Mount Vernon, Iowa, I'd like to welcome Andy, also known as Caygeon Junkin. Welcome, Caygeon, and thank you so much for being here.
How are you doing today? It's good to be talking to a fellow Canadian. So that's great.
Yeah, that's
That's
right.
living in
We're
America.
both in the
Like
US.
just like we're both Canadian refugees down here in America. So
That's right. Yeah.
anyways,
Thank goodness they haven't sent us home yet.
no.
So let's start off by talking about farming a little bit. Farming, it has changed a lot in the last 50 years. So what do you think is the biggest overlooked change that impacts everyone's lives profoundly?
Well, what do you think the biggest thing is? What do you think the biggest change is?
I would
In your opinion?
say technology and entitlement.
Yeah, I would say for me, I think the biggest change we've had is technology, but it's not like
Mhm.
GPS or GMO technology. I think it's the fact that fewer farmers are dropping dead of heart attacks in their 60s than back in the 1960s.
That's a
And
good point.
modern health sciences has been a game changer. Like back in the 60s when dad was 60, he would retire as soon as his son and daughter came home from college because his hips were shot. And he'd be on the farm and help out from time to time. But generally, there'd just be one generation farming at a time. But now we've got two, if not three generations farming together. And because this technology is so darn expensive, you need, it doesn't make sense every 20 years to be splitting up family capital because you need to keep your capital together so you can afford this technology. And so suddenly we got a situation instead of there being one generation farming at a time, you got two, three siblings and two, three generations farming together. You got a situation where there's too many chiefs and not enough Indians. And, I think that we joke about it, but it's not really a joke. We got a situation where we pretend to be the perfect farm family to the neighbors. And they might tell you that, but neighbors might believe that you are the perfect farm family. But behind the shop, everybody's butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions, and you get nowhere fast. And we really just haven't thought about the economic impact about it. I mean, we joke about it, but it's really no joke. For half the decisions that should be getting made are not getting made because we're either butting heads or too often we're just too passive aggressive. And we don't talk about decisions that should be getting made. And as a result, a lot of decisions don't get made or made well. And the decision to not make a decision is a decision in itself. And this friction between family members is causing so much stress. It's causing real mental health problems. And, it all comes down to the fact that we're stubborn. And in my opinion, we got to stop being stubborn with each other and start being more stubborn at the critical things that matter.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And yeah, I'd never heard it, never really thought about it like that, our lifespans and our working ages are getting so much longer. So those are great points.
It's a game changer, and it really impacts succession planning in a profound way, as well as farm profitability.
Yeah, I guess. And you have a really interesting background. You're originally from a little town called Bob Cajun, and that's just a few hours away from where I'm originally from in
Yeah,
Ontario, Canada.
yeah.
And so tell me about your family farm and what led you to actually walk away from that in the early 2000s.
Well, where you're actually from, it's really good quality land. I think a lot of Americans don't understand that Ontario has as good of land as Iowa, and where you're from, it's a lot like Iowa. But where I'm from, it's just on the edge of the world. Basically, it's on the edge of the Canadian wilderness. Like we literally had bears and moose walk through our cornfields, and it's pretty tough land. And the reason why my family, the first white man killed in the township was on our farm was actually an ancestor of mine back seven generations in 1832.
Wow.
And he died, I always thought, so I could have a right to farm.
Mhm.
And I found out the hard way that farming is not a right, it's a privilege. And unfortunately, what made my family successful for seven generations is the fact that we were stubborn. And yet, what caused my family to fail is the fact that we were stubborn. And what became the family farm dream of farming with my family became nightmare way too quick.
Yeah, for sure. And what led you to start off offering your help to farm families?
Well, I think the thing is when I came home from college, see the day I left for college, my mother, she showed me the actual farm financials and we hadn't made money for close to a decade. And
Wow.
she said to me, if you don't fix these numbers and learn something at school, I'm going to leave your father. So I was hyper motivated to go off to agriculture college.
You went to
Um,
Ridgetown, right?
I went to Guelph.
Oh,
University of
Guelph.
Guelph
Okay.
had a 2 year program, and then I went on to do the 4 year. So I did a 2 year farm management diploma, and then I did a 4 year agribusiness degree, and I went for a year down in Australia in between.
Wow.
And but the thing is that when I came home from college, um, I had all these ideas as to how to improve my operation and turn our family farm around. And the thing is that um, my uncle made a joke to my dad that um, my my crops would look better than his. And my dad actually plowed my crops under. And from that point forward, farm succession didn't go successfully. And actually, my parents, we had a succession planner out to the farm, and and we sat down at the kitchen table for about 20 minutes. And my dad left the meeting. And my mom went out to the porch and she says, if you don't get a business plan with your son in place, and I'm going to leave you. And do not buy more farming equipment until we have a business plan in place. And my dad, just to spite her, went off to a auction sale, and he bought a manure spreader. And he came home with that manure spreader. I guess you could say the shit hit the fan. And essentially, I've been turning shitty situations around ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
So,
that's incredible. That's
yeah,
a lot.
it is. It is what it is. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. So I know that you live faith-based, but what role does faith play in your life?
Um, it's everything. I mean, when I was 35, we had the day that my mom left my dad. It was about a 10-year period after that we continued. I didn't prioritize getting married myself. I prioritized trying to save the farm and save my parents' marriage. And it was, um, it was dysfunctional. My dad's very much a narcissist. And I put an ultimatum down saying that if we don't get succession planning and a business plan in place by the time I'm 35, I'm going to kill myself. And did that as a threat. And then on my 35th birthday, I actually found myself on a barn beam. And I had a rope around my neck, and I had a 22 in my lap. And I didn't want to kill myself, but I didn't see, like, all I wanted to do was carry on a 7 generation family tradition. I thought that was my fate. And to me, life was meaningless without the farm. And because I'm a, like when I went to University of Guelph, everybody called me Bob Caygeon because I didn't care about you knowing my name. I cared about the fact that you knew I was a 7th generation farm boy from a little town called Bob Caygeon. I was going to carry on the 7th generation family tradition.
Mhm.
And without the ability to farm in Bob Caygeon, I didn't see a future in life. And I don't know how long I sat in that barn beam, but the thing is that um, I walked in just thinking about myself and just feeling sorry for myself and just really being infatuated with how I'd been wronged. My dad was very narcissistic. I was very much gaslit for about a decade. I didn't even know what the term gaslighting meant until the doctor actually, a couple weeks before, I actually gone to a psychiatrist for several months. I'd actually been cleared as being sane. And I actually had a meeting before my 35th birthday with my parents. They were accusing me of being crazy. And the psychiatrist said, your son has made a lot of bad decisions in life because of the circumstances of your farm, but it's not because he's mentally ill. He's emotionally sick, you know? And I didn't understand the importance of mental health. But here I was sitting on the barn beam. And I just don't know how long I was on that barn. And then I just started thinking about my friends. And like when I came home from Guelph to the farm, I was so jealous of all my friends because their dads had bent over backwards to build them barns and buy farms. Like I had two buddies that they were actually in the dorm room next to me, and I had spent the 2 years that I was in the diploma program. I had spent every day in the university library, 12 hours a day, like a clockwork, like I was punching into a factory. If I wasn't in class, I would sit in the university library trying to read textbooks and try to figure out how to save the farm. And I had a 200-page business plan. I started working with in the first semester with the professor that taught that final year course in university, where you write a business plan and I did it to turn around a farm. And here my buddies next door in the dorm room next to me, they had teamed up together and they actually wrote the same business plan and they just copied it off each other. They spent the day before. And so I was so jealous that their bad dads were bending over backwards. And here my dad, I spent so much time putting, they wrote the business plan the night before it was due. And I spent so much time putting together this 200-page business plan that my dad just looked at and threw in the fire. And I was so jealous of them. But over the years, that 10-year period, when your parents get divorced over a manure spreader, that you only have to tell one friend, and you know how rural Ontario is. You tell one person that's in confidence, it's community news, right?
Yeah.
So I became the guy everybody went to have a beer with when they had problems farming with their old man. And I started actually helping out a few friends. There's a couple of situations I mediated, and I realized that was my life calling. At that, I mean, my whole purpose in life went from carrying on a 7th-generation tradition. I've never been back to Bob Caygeon since that moment.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and I won't until my boy spread my ashes. Mm-hmm. And my whole purpose in life is to try to help as many farms between now and then avoid the problems my family's gone through, and so that they can have a heaven on earth here on the family farm.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. That, your story gives me goosebumps. It's, I'm sorry that you had to go through all of that. But you definitely embraced the good and moved on with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So now you live in Iowa.
Yeah.
What led you to move to the US?
Well, I always joke that I met too many girls that turned out to be my cousins, and actually that's not. So but the truth is that I always had a notion about a certain girl who looked a certain way, and everybody always thought I was crazy. But I was, just always had this notion, and I held out until I could come across her, and I did it when I was 42. I actually went on farmersonly.com mm-hmm. and went on one date with Bernadette Fox is her name, and she's my wife. And it was actually her first date. She was going to be a nun. She at 29, she was really always had dreamed of being a nun, but she looked after her father until he passed away. And she farmed with her dad, and then she changed her mind. She had a change of heart, and we went. So my first date with her was actually her first date ever. Really? And 4 dates later, we were engaged.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, I mean, I knew right at the first time, the first hour I met her, that this is going to be your last first date. And 5 years later, my marriage has actually exceeded my expectations. And we're very lucky to live here in Iowa, and we're creating heaven on earth. It's really great.
Yeah. And are you farming, and do you have kids?
Yeah, we bought a little farm here, and we have 3 kids under 4. Huck's 4th birthday is tomorrow, or on Saturday. And so we're very excited about, it's life's going really good. So
yeah. So, anybody out there that's thinking that life can't get better, here's a case study for you that, what you've done, your turnaround has just been remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was, I mean, holding out for the right girl was it was tough, because here I was in my 40s, and there's nothing I wanted more than to have kids. I really love kids. Yeah. But holding out in your 30s, when you're hit 40 and you're in a small town, folks say that there's something wrong with him, right? But I knew I had a certain notion about a certain girl who looked and was a certain way, and I'm really happy that I waited, because it's really been awesome to experience.
That's awesome. And you had a lot of living to do first and figuring things out. So
Absolutely,
there
yeah.
was all it was all part of the plan, right?
Yeah, there's no way when I started off doing what I was doing to get my first 10,000 hours of experience doing what I'm doing today.
Mhm.
There was no way I could support a family. I did a lot of work, for free, helping friends out. There was times often I would get paid, just to do a lot of farm debt turnarounds where I'd take steak, meat out of the freezer from the farm,
Mhm.
and that would be how I get paid, or vegetables out of the garden.
Yeah.
And I didn't care. For me, it was all about saving family farms.
Yeah.
And I lived for the first 5 years of what I did. It was pretty rough, but I'm really glad I made the sacrifice because I really enjoy what I do now, and it's great to see the changes in people's lives.
Wow. Yeah. So you've been now doing this for close to 15 years where you're helping family farms.
Yeah.
What's the most important thing that you've learned so far through this?
Um, I think for me initially it was really frustrating that um, I go to family farms as a mediator,
Mhm.
and what I didn't understand, and I get taught to me by somebody I was mentoring under, that you know I couldn't accept failure.
Mhm.
And I really, every time that a family would have me on the farm and they just go on pointing fingers at each other, and not really want to improve, but they really just wanted to point blame and have somebody take their side so that they could exit the relationship.
Right.
I didn't understand what was going on until I met with me. I pulled a lot of rabbits out of the hat, but I wasn't having 100% success rate. And a mediator just shrugged it off that I work with a couple of mediators as mentors, across North America, work with the best. And one guy that had his PhD and was well known, he just shrugged it off. He says, "You win some or you lose some." But to me, like, failure is not an option because I know what it's like to wake up on Christmas morning, milking another man's cows 500 miles away from home,
Right.
and alone, right? And so I was sitting there at a kitchen table about a couple of years into what I was doing, and there was it was a situation where Grandpa had died, and there's two brothers that had been best friends. And about 7 years before Grandpa died, and two best friends went to become the worst enemies. And these guys were in their almost late 30s, early 40s, and they were their wives were sitting at the kitchen table, and they actually had been best friends in high school. And that day when I met them, they were worst enemies.
Wow.
And Grandma was sitting at the end of the kitchen table, and all they were doing was pointing fingers at each other. They only wanted me to get them. They wanted me to act like Dr. Phil or a judge
Mhm.
to determine who was in the wrong, and they weren't there to have me as a mediator to really fix the problem. They just wanted somebody to give them permission for the sin that they're about to do. And I had heard from this mediator that I'd been mentored by that it's a lot like marriage counseling. He said, like, don't take it so personally because, half the people that go to a marriage counselor get divorced within 4 years.
Right.
And I was so frustrated because they were such a good family. Like, they were a good Christian farm family. They had a very successful operation. And I sat there and I looked out the window, and there was this kid, and he was about 17 years old, and he was leading this 4-H calf, and it was stubborn. And I started thinking about, my frustration of having to deal with these stubborn families and trying to help these folks, but they were just being so stubborn that they were hurting themselves. And I sat, and this family was Christian Reform, and the Bible was out on the kitchen table, and they were in the habit of reading the Bible 3 times a day. And Matthew 7:5 was out on the kitchen table. His words were written in red. And I don't mean to imply, I never imply my Christian faith onto anybody else. But this spoke to me as Matthew 7:5 says, do not talk about taking the speck of dust out of your brother's eye until you've taken the plank out of your own.
Right.
And I looked at that kid that was leading that 4-H calf. And were you ever in 4-H, Chrissy?
I wasn't. No.
Okay.
I did a lot of horse shows, but not.
You
4-H.
did a lot of horse. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
For me, 4-H is all about the family farm environment, creating the opportunity for a son or daughter to become a better person.
Right.
Self-improvement, actualization. And here this kid was leading a stubborn 4-H calf, and the family farm was the environment to become a better person. And here in this kitchen table, his parents, the farm was bringing out the worst in them.
Right.
And if they split up in 20 minutes, like they were about to do, that kid wouldn't be farming in 20 years' time. And that just completely changed my perspective.
Wow.
When and essentially, I don't allow people to point fingers at each other anymore, because every time you point your finger, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. And I look at when I work with a family farm, I don't try to broker a deal or anything like that. I get everybody to ask 3 simple questions. How do we improve how we work together? Each meeting I meet with them, I make one improvement of how they work together, one improvement in everybody's character. And I do that through phone calls, private phone calls, or, every time I'm asking, what's one simple way you can improve your character so you're a better partner and friend anybody would want to work with. And then each meeting, I'm really focused on the money and I'm squeezing out more profitability of an operation. And why I'm doing that is obviously, if we can make $5,000, $10,000 in improved efficiency in an operation, is always good. But the bigger thing is that farmers, they really feel comfortable talking about how money. They don't want Dr. Phil to come on their farm and sing Kumbaya, yeah. Right? And what I do throughout that process of them brainstorming ways to improve the profitability and efficiency of the farm is I get them actually listening to each other instead of talking over top of each other. And, if I can make those 3 improvements, they go from being stubborn with each other to start being stubborn at the critical habits that make a family farm successful.
Right. Yeah, that's really intriguing, actually, to start with what's wrong with yourself. That's important.
Self-actualization is the key.
Yeah.
Because if you have a partner that is always coming to the meetings, every day, if he shows up to the farm and always try and be the best version of himself as possible, and you have a process where you become more self-aware about, what you need to tweak in order to become a better partner and friend anybody would want to work with, and you are striving to become a better person. If everybody has that attitude of continuous improvement, by being stubborn at adapting good habits instead of constantly, the farm bringing out the worst in you, if trying to make the farming environment to bring out the best in you, it's a game changer as far as improved family relationships, as well as, you have your rock stars when it comes to farming together.
Yeah.
The farm is so much more efficient as a result.
So how do you work with the family? Is it over Zoom or over the phone?
I used to go out to the farm and pet the dog, right? And have grandma's pie. But what I've started doing was actually, there was a lot of farms that couldn't afford my services, and so I started doing work over Zoom. Mm-hmm. And I used to drive about 50 to 70,000 miles a year.
Wow.
All over North America. But when I was on that farm, I'd have to, because I drive maybe 500,000 miles, I try to make 10 changes on that farm in a day. Mm-hmm. And, by the time you have a 4-hour meeting on a farm, everybody's burnt out and just completely forgets what happened that day. And more importantly, suggest changes. And then 2 weeks later, it's nobody's implementing those changes into reality. And what I found with the Zoom clients is I'm able to make just one simple improvement in how you work together, one improvement in efficiency. And through my phone calls one-on-one with each individual, I was able to make little changes in character. And, you know, when I start working with a family at the beginning, we take family bad habits. Like we talk about cognitive distortions, which in layman's terms is basically if you have an issue with temper, you know, it's a family habit.
Mhm.
Let's break that habit. Let's look at how we think about things. Do we turn a molehill and we make it into a mountain? And how do we rethink how we do things? And so if you can make one improvement in character every time we meet, generally I meet with a family 25 times over a year. So I meet with them roughly every other week.
Oh, wow.
And if you can make 25 improvements in the course of a year, as to make one improvement in efficiency, one improvement in how you work together, and one improvement in everybody's character, that's over 75 improvements. And then if you add 2, 3 family members, that's well over 100 improvements, and
Wow.
your family farm will be 100 times better as a result.
Wow,
And
that's incredible.
yeah, if you fix that problem and you get the family to stop being stubborn with each other, then you can have an intelligent conversation between the family members about succession planning.
Right.
Because too often with succession planning, you know, family members have never sat down and they're constantly bickering about simple production related decisions. And they're, you know, if you can't make a decision as to what type of tractor you're going to buy
Mhm.
without everybody getting into an argument, or making a simple improvement such as trying a new type of teat dip on with milking cows, if that's an argument, or a new type of fertilizer program within family members, you know, how are you supposed to have a discussion about where the farm's going to be in 10 years time?
Right.
And until you can sit down and squeeze out an extra 10% profitability out of your operation, you're not ready to have that conversation about where the farm's going to be in 10 years time. But if you can get the family being able to get rid of the egos
Mhm.
and that stubbornness and that bickering, then having that conversation with succession planning is a pleasant 2-hour conversation.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah,
So
that probably just sounds like music to some people's ears listening right now.
I have a lot of lawyers and accountants and a lot of succession professionals. They call me out to the most dire situations, and that's
Yeah.
where I've sorted out the most dire situations in 21 states and 5 Canadian provinces,
Mhm.
using this process.
Yeah.
And if you fix a stubborn, you can fix everything. But more importantly, anything you can do to improve the quality of decision making, it's when you think about it, if you can get a family farm and you get everybody from button head and pull the farm different directions, being able to sit down and make decisions together and get everybody pulling the same direction, you're going to skyrocket the farm's profitability. And all
Absolutely.
that butting ahead is going to go by the wayside. And farming with family is fun again.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, why not do that as the kids are coming home to the farm
Mhm.
instead of waiting until the sons or daughters are in the 30s and 40s and somebody's about to get a divorce or somebody's thinking about suicide?
Yeah.
Why not evolve how you work together as a family from good to great from the start?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, why wait until there's problems? Why not just start
Absolutely.
right now?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
that's
Wow.
that's what excites me, is that more and more people are starting to use it as a proactive process instead of
Mhm.
calling me out to turn around the most dire situations.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Right. And when you're at farms and dealing with people, how important is it, and for yourself too, is it for farm kids to carry on that next generation of their family farm?
Um, to me, it's really important. This is what I do. What I
Yeah.
do. I mean, I'm really passionate about it. But I think that it's important to find your bliss.
Mhm.
And the the problem I often see with family farms is that there's a lot of sons and daughters who are in the 30s and 40s. I've done a lot of farm debt turnarounds,
Mhm.
and there's been a couple situations where there's been a son or daughter that's taken over a family farm, and now they're in their 40s. Their dad might have passed away a few years before, and they like farming, but they just don't love it. And they have farmed because um, they're trying to meet their parents' expectations and live their parents' dreams, because it was always their parents' dreams for them to farm.
Right.
And they're trying to meet that obligation and they like farming, but they just don't love it.
Mhm.
And there's nothing more sad. There was actually circumstance I had seen, was they called me actually too late to do it farm. I mean, they called me way too late, and that's the sad part about that I get frustrated by is people call me, way after the bankruptcy. They're just wanting, an outsider's opinion as to whether I should pull a plug. But there's nothing more sad than for a son to be able to have to take a lot of farms. They're incorporated, so mom and dad live in a house that's actually owned by the corporation. And when that farm goes bankrupt, in a lot of states, you're homeless.
Right.
And there is nothing more sad than a son to have to carry a couch and move his parents into subsidized housing. But I've seen that happen because I've seen a son break down and crying because, he just didn't have that passion for family farm.
Yeah.
So it's really important to me to have that. I'm really good at having that conversation about finding your bliss.
Mhm.
And I'll give you an example. Like just 2 days ago, I think I was talking to a farmer that was taking over. Yeah, I mean, he liked farming, but I said, why do you farm? And he says, well, I like carrying on tradition. And then I continued to drill down to why. And we shift this whole mindset. I mean, this was a kid that was having a hard time getting out of bed in the morning.
Wow.
And the reason why he was getting out of bed was because he was being yelled at by his parents to get out of bed. It wasn't because he wanted to get out of bed.
Mhm.
And it's really important that you find out your reason why you do what you do. And just because your dad likes doing something like driving tractors and that's his passion, your passion might be different. Your passion might be in the challenge of getting more production out of the cows. Everybody has their different reasons for farming, but it's really important to find out why you want to farm. It's really important to understand your North Star. And then more importantly, it's really important that all family members find their North Star.
Mhm.
And
And
that the
does that
North
mean
Star,
even if that North Star isn't farming, is that okay?
absolutely. And that's part, I mean, 10% of the time that's the conversation I have.
Mhm.
But I would rather you have that conversation, even though it's awkward. I'm really good at helping. There's a lot of farmers, their dream is for their son or daughter to take over the farm. And they might have a bit of narcissistic tendencies. And, there's nothing sadder than to see um, parents' savings be dwindled because of a lack of passion in the son. I mean, there's nothing sadder, as I said, than to have to carry a couch out of the farmhouse that's been in the farm family for generations and move your parents in subsidized housing. And I'm really good at having that conversation with parents where they had dreams for their kids to take over and for them to come to acceptance that this is not my son or daughter's dream. But
Mhm.
I'm also really good at taking those kids that are on the fence and helping them rewire how they think so that they're farming for their dream, not their parents.
Yeah.
It becomes I mean, I really feel that the first piece of land, I mean, a lot of bankers or accountants will tell you that if the kid's having a hard time getting out of bed in the morning, the first piece of land that a son or daughter should buy, they should buy the farm next door so that they have that fear of debt to get them out of bed in the morning.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and I feel that you shouldn't be driven by fear. You should be driven by a passion and bliss.
Mhm.
And I encourage a lot of young farmers that that little cemetery. I don't know where down your Richtown way that where you're from. Um, there's a lot of family farms. They have a little cemetery that's been in the family for
Yeah.
generations just down the road. I encourage the kids to actually buy the first plot of land that they buy is actually their gravesite just down the road. If they really, and then by them asking themselves the question, do I really want to live and die here?
Yeah.
Do I want to be here for the
That's
rest
a
of
good
my
point.
life? Um, you know, if you can have a vision as to, you don't know how long you're going to be on this earth, but the real question is, what do you want to do with your life while you're on it?
Yeah.
And I think that if a son and daughter buys that plot of land for themselves as well as their families, Then when they get out of bed in the morning, they're really driven towards, what is it you want to accomplish between now and then. And I encourage some kids to actually write down those goals onto a piece of paper and put it like a little time capsule where they're going to be buried. And I mean, plans change over time, but the passion towards, what's your North Star is really important for you to understand what it is you're driven to be. And when you start making decisions from that context, all the nonsense you have with pride and egos goes out by the windows. And if you have everybody just being driven by the same North Star, you'll have a family that, instead of not talking to each other and being buried beside each other 10 feet away from each other, even though they couldn't be in the same room with each other, you'll have a family that really wants to be and enjoys each other's company day to day. Because you become the partner and friend you want to be. Everybody starts working towards their dreams instead of fear of failure.
Yeah, and that issue alone can help mental health so much. Just having that passion and that goal and that reason for living, and just really taking the time to figure that out, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think mental health is a big topic these days, and I'm really passionate about emotional health because I think that's something we don't. I mean, honestly, I didn't know about what emotional health meant until. Do you know what emotional health means? Like what the definition is?
I don't know the definition.
Do you know what the difference is? Basically, mental health is basically a chemical imbalance. It's a medical issue, right? Whereas emotional health is how we think and feel about our problems, about how we think and feel about life, and I think that there's a lot of talk about mental health, and it's a huge problem in agriculture, right?
Yeah.
But it's like high blood pressure. Okay, I have high blood pressure because I have a stressful job, right? And the doctor put me on pills, and so for high blood pressure, he didn't talk to me about diet and exercise. He just said, "Oh, it's just a genetic factor. You can't do anything about it." That's what he said. He actually said that to me. Now, I've been working really hard. My goal in 5 years is to get off the high blood pressure pills.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, and there's things I can't change, like the stress of what I do.
Yeah.
But I think that it's the same thing with mental health. I think it's really, sometimes it's a genetic factor, and you can't change that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a chemical imbalance in your brain chemistry. It's just the same as having high blood pressure or having diabetes.
Absolutely.
But I think that we have too many people popping pills and that's the solution. I see 25% of farmers right now, on 25% of farms right now, there's somebody, if not several partners, that are taking pills. And we're taking the pills, but we're not talking about the fundamental issues, what's causing the stress. And I think that we have to be proactive about this. Why live in an environment that's negative? Why not create heaven on earth? And that's what I'm really focused on is getting emotional health in place. Like, I never thought I'd do this. Like when I was in high school, I never read a book cover to cover, right? Never. I didn't care about, my grade 10 English project where they made us read a book. I don't know. What'd you read when you were in grade 10 for your English high school?
I don't even remember. There were lots of books. What would it have been that year? Probably The Outsiders was one, and the 1984, right?
I think we're living that
Isn't
now. Go Canada.
That one's funny.
Anyways.
I've thought about that one often lately.
Well, I was supposed to read 1984, but my English teacher was Greg, and he was also my cousin, and he just shook his head. He says, "You're going to be a farmer." So the thing is, I said, "Greg, I'm going to read Beef Cattle Science." So that was what I read in grade 10, and it was a thick book. And I think I read Dairy Science in grade 11. anyways, the thing is, he just shook his head and she says, "You're never going to read this book, are you?" But the thing is, ever since then,
You should have said, "I'm going to live it someday, so don't worry."
yeah, well, that's what he knew. He just shook his head. He says,
Yeah.
"Well, you can't change the Junkins." Anyway, so the thing is that, um, since that moment when I was in the barn, I've been trying to read between 75 to 100 pages every day.
Wow.
And I never thought I would be reading books by Marcus Aurelius. But ancient Greek philosophy of Stoicism has got so much for agriculture. And I'm trying to apply these principles of philosophy. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a form of psychology, is all based on ancient wisdom that goes back to people like Marcus Aurelius or Seneca. Right. And the question is, how do you apply that in simple terms that a farmer can understand so it can change his perspective? So instead of, when he gets angry, how can he focus on the things that matters?
Yeah.
So that, he's not angry for 3 days because of an incident, but he looks at a different concept and is able to deal with the problem productively. And so we create a happy environment between partners. And I'm all about applying these principles to agriculture. So I really think that we got to talk about what kind of business culture can we create within a farm family. How can I look at problems as opportunities, and have a positive, emotionally safe environment instead of the toxic one that's happening on a lot of family farms.
Right. Yeah. And the topic of mental health is very dear to my heart. My own dad suffered from chronic depression as I was growing up, and it was always hard to see those ups and downs, like the hopelessness in his eyes, from time to time.
Yeah.
And but do you think that we're doing a good job removing that stigma?
No.
Especially for men? Are we there yet?
I think it's great that we're, as I said earlier, I think it's great that we're making it okay to go to the doctors, and if there's a chemical imbalance, to get it addressed. I think we're doing a great job of that from that perspective, but we're doing a terrible job of trying to create the environment from day one, so that it's happily ever after. We pretend to the neighbors that we're the perfect farm family, but behind the barn for a lot of family farms, it's a toxic environment.
Yeah.
And to me, it makes sense that, it's a lot like, nobody gets divorced. Nobody gets married expecting to get divorced. And nobody goes home to farm with a family expecting to 10, 20 years later, leave the farm in a rage. But for a lot of farm families, they get into a farming partnership with their family thinking that's going to be happily ever after. And just like marriage counseling, was created as a result, and it's a very similar parallel to what I do as marriage counseling. A lot of priests started introducing marriage counseling after seeing families fall apart in their church. But there were some priests and preachers started insisting that before they married the young couple, that they did pre-marriage counseling so that they got the fundamentals in place, because there's a lot of taboo topics in agriculture. In just the same way as there's taboo topics in the marriage, like things like, how do you organize your finances, sexual relationships, right? Household chores. These are taboo topics we joke about, but they really do ruin marriages. In the same way, there's a lot of things that family farms we might joke about when we're having a beer with the neighbors, but we don't. They're landmines you just can't anticipate.
Yeah.
And I really think that it's important for me as a son and daughter. I mean, the sooner I can get working with a family farm and transition a family from a parent-child relationship to a professional working relationship, if you can get some fundamentals or rules in place as to how you work together, and you can rewire your brain, so instead of getting really angry and turning a molehill into a mountain, if you can rewire how you look at things as instead of being problems as opportunities, you could have 10 years of working with family. That first 10 years is fun, and then you don't have that same stress that causes mental health issues as a side effect. You know, just the same as it makes sense to start eating healthy and having a good lifestyle when you're in your early 20s instead of in your 50s. Have to go on a diet and lose 50 pounds, right?
Mhm.
It makes sense to proactively start this from day one.
Yeah.
And I think that's how, and it really comes down to having a healthy lifestyle from day one. And I think that I'm very passionate about starting to work with as many. I offer a course online. Um, I do with Washington Farm Bureau. It's called the Coming Home to Farm course. It's actually available on my website. We call it Farming Through Stubborn Family, and I offer it free online because
Oh,
I'm
that's
really
awesome.
passionate about getting some fundamentals in place. And I'd be happy to sit down with any farm family and identify what problems you're having today, and maybe get some practical things in place from day one, so that the next 10 years of farming with your family, as you come home, the kid comes home from college or a career, as they come home, if they can get some fundamentals in place as to how they work together with this family, so the next 10 years is fun. Farming with family is fun instead of detrimental, so you can avoid the problems my family had when we started working together, because
Yeah.
there was nothing I wanted to do with them to farm with my dad, right? I
Mhm.
thought it was going to be happily ever after, and it was hell on earth.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a good resource to
Yeah,
start planning early.
absolutely.
And yeah, and farming is just such a unique business, right? Because you have no control over the price of your product. There's no control over inputs, no control over the weather. And then you have this power struggle between generations. So, you know, what is your advice to those farm families, just general, before you even get into everything, on how to come out on that other side thriving?
Well, I think that I think it comes down to getting a fundamental Stoic value.
Yeah.
You're probably familiar with the Serenity Prayer. Have you ever heard
Mhm.
the Serenity Prayer?
I have, yes.
What do you remember what it is off the top of your head, or?
Yep, God grant me the wisdom to change the things I can, the what is it? Acceptance to change. Oh man, I nope.
Well,
I know it, but
no,
I'm sure you do.
I, I think there's one thing is knowing it, and there's another
Mhm.
thing to actually live it.
Yeah.
And it's God give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change,
Mhm.
and the courage to change the things I can change, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I've done a lot of farm debt turnarounds, and when I show up to the farm, they're wanting to talk about the things they cannot change,
Mhm.
right? And that's the most common thing between all the farm debt turnarounds I've walked onto. They want to talk about the things they cannot change, and they
Yeah.
aren't really seeing the opportunities that they can change. And
Right.
so for the first 6 weeks that I work with a family, um, they want to talk. When I show up day one, they want to talk about the farm financials, what they have to sell, how to reorganize. The two things I'm focused on is how do we getting families make simple little production related decisions.
Mhm.
And I'd rather them. I remember one farm, we had a 20-minute argument um, over pushing up feed to the cows. It was a dairy operation in dire circumstances, and we had a 20-minute argument between the partners as to there was three partners involved as to who was responsible for pushing up the feed 5 times a day. And we got them over that deal, and then we 6 months later we got them being able to sit down and reorganize their debt, because we got them from having an I'm in that situation, like a lot of farm families, everybody's butting heads and pulling the farm different directions.
Yeah.
Essentially, everybody's having an argument about who's smarter than the other guy. And there's a lot of talking, but there's not a lot of listening. And the first thing I want to do is problem solve how you problem solve. And then you can really solve the fundamental issues. I had a farm one time, they had $17 million of debt, and they lost their bank financing. And that was the first thing they wanted to do was talk about the debt. I said, no, it's like, before you start, if you start a fire, the first thing you do is you start with the kindling first. You don't start with the big logs,
Right.
right?
That's smart.
And it's the same thing with turning around a farm. You start with the small decisions first and get really good at listening to each other and brainstorming each other and brainstorm together, and then adding more larger and larger logs as you can deal with it. But when it comes down to coming back to the Serenity Prayer, the other thing I focus on is getting them focusing on their time and the things they can control right away. Because when you're dealing with a farm debt situation, there's a lot of things you can't control, like the prices, but you can control what time you get out of bed tomorrow morning. Where you can control where am I going to put 80% of effort? What are the 20% of things that I'm going to put 80% effort into? And if I can get a farmer, that's a principle of applying Stoic wisdom. If I can get a farmer to rewire his brain so that instead of thinking 80% of his time about things he can't control, like the markets and the weather and, what his dad is thinking or what his partners are thinking, if he's focused on the things he can control and applying the principles such as how you control your time. What are you doing with your time? Are you investing it wisely? Are you and your partners, do you guys know does the right hand know what the left hand is doing? Are we working together as a team? Or am I trying to use a skid steer at the same time dad wants to use a skid steer? Are we constantly bickering and losing efficiencies as a result of that? If I can get a family to change how they work together, both as far as making decisions and then getting everybody's mindset so that they're focusing on the things that matter, you can nearly double a farm's profitability within 2 years. It's amazing. I've done a lot of farm debt turnarounds. And, at one time it was a matter of coming into flying in an expert and telling the farm what to do. The truth is farmers are stubborn and they just want somebody to come on the farm and tell them that they're doing a good job. And it's the bank's fault for pulling the debt.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they won't. I've seen farmers get time in, time out. When we flew in a consultant, in the end, those recommendations never got followed through on because the farmers are stubborn. They don't like being told what to do. But the truth is, within a farm family, if you've got 3-4 partners, the problem you have that's causing these farms to be inefficient is everybody's smart. But the thing is, we're butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. You all and as a result, you're making stupid decisions together as a family.
Yeah.
And if you can change the nature of how you work together, make good decisions together, and have everybody focus on the things that matter and getting those things done, you can nearly double a farm's profitability within a year or two. It's amazing.
And yeah, debt's a big deal. I saw a stat last week, according to the USDA, American farmers have almost $500 billion in debt. And it can be crushing. And, with all those other things that those stressors, this is just adding to the stress. So how can farms survive without drowning in this debt? Is it possible?
Oh, everybody says it's a game of economies of scale. And I do think that, obviously the larger the operation you have, the more efficiency you have. Let's say, but you take a $5 million farm and let's say a $40 million farm. Okay. And so the $40 million farm, they have a little bit more buying power, right? But let's just say today that both families, their neighbors will say they're a good farm family, but the truth is behind the barn, they're bickering, they're butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. But let's say that the family that's a $40 million farm, for the next 10 years, they don't change what they're doing. But the $5 million farm, as a result of watching this podcast, they start making changes in how they work together.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask you 3 simple questions. The first question is, let's say that next 10 years, 7 out of 10 years are really tough years in the family operations because of the economic circumstances. And I think that could be a possibility. There's going to be a couple of years that it's good prices, but it's going to be really wonky.
Yeah.
Right? Those are things we can't control. But my question is this. The family that's a $40 million farm, they don't change what they're doing. For every decision, they're butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. And half the decisions that should be getting made are not getting made and money slipping between the cracks. They're not making real changes to their operation. But the $5 million farm, they go from butting heads and being able to make decisions together and evolve their operation, continuously evolving how they work together, continuously improving the efficiencies because they're making better quality decisions together. My question to you is this. First question is, who is going to be able to improve their efficiency so they can survive crisis?
Yeah.
And then the second question is, who's going to be able to sit down and do succession planning? The family that's bickering all the time, not listening to each other, or the family that's actually learned to actually try to understand what the other partners are thinking?
Right.
And then the third question, and most important, is which family farm do you want to work on for the next 10 years? Which environment is going to create the healthy environment that you want to raise your kids on, and you're going to have good mental health?
Yeah.
It all comes down to improving, going from being stubborn with each other to start being stubborn and turning bad habits into good habits and working towards, that's how you make a farm successful.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. That's really great. And I've been to your website and you have a keynote which gives different perspective on farm succession that I've never heard. So do you speak often?
I actually don't. There's only a handful of times a year.
Mhm.
The last 15 years, I really just focused on saving family farms.
Yeah.
And I'm only one man. I only have so much time. And I spent a lot of my time dedicated to writing books.
Mhm.
And I've written 5 books. Actually, if you go to my website, I'll give you a free copy of my latest book. It's called Bulletproof Your Farm. And but the thing is that what I've realized is that a lot of farmers they would rather just like my book. I wrote it so that you can actually sit down for an hour and read it within an hour, maybe 2 hours.
Mhm.
But the truth is, a farmer would rather just go to a meeting and actually listen to a good speaker and hear their story. And so, for that reason, I made a decision to reorganize my time, and so that I can actually speak at a lot of events here in the Midwest this
Yeah.
winter. So I've really only spoken a handful of times in the Midwest, and since being here for 5 years, mostly because we've been having babies during the winter.
Yeah.
So the thing is that if anybody's looking for a speaker this winter, I'd love to speak at your event. And you can see what my speaking is like by going on my website, Stubborn.farm.
And you're at the North Star Egg Expo, right?
Yeah, we're doing something different there. It's actually first year I think that event's going on. It's going to be at the Ritchie
Mhm.
Brothers auction yard, which is just off of the I-35 near Minneapolis there.
Okay.
And what they're having me actually do is, you know how you have a trade show and you have speakers throughout the day, and then you have an empty stage. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to get a Wheel of Fortune. And what I mean, I like speaking to farmers. There's nothing I like doing more. But I really like asking questions.
Yeah.
And what I've compiled is a list of 18 of the most common questions I get asked at when I speak or by farmers. And I put it into Wheel of Fortune. And so spin the wheel, and I'll give a 10-minute TED talk on that topic. So I'm doing between speakers at the event. They're going to have me on the stage answering different questions, and every time you see me,
Cool
it'll
idea.
be a different type of presentation. So we're
Mhm.
going to try that out, and it might be something I do at more trade shows. It might actually be something I do as a small offshoot. I might speak at an event, be as a keynote, and then if they want to have small groups, the farmers can ask me questions or have me spin the wheel, and we can have a really good quality discussion. I really like speaking one-on-one to small groups too. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And
yeah,
kind of the cool thing about you is you're not, the typical Harvard grad, that when a farmer thinks of an advisor coming in a suit, you are a farmer. You lived it and you've lived the worst experiences you can have with the family and you came out the other side with your own family farm. So I think that's really helps um tear down some of those walls, right?
yeah. Like I'm not Dr. Phil. Like when I walk onto a farm, I don't judge because I've been there myself. Like there was a day when I ripped a banister off a wall, and because I was so angry and frustrated
Yeah.
working with my family, and it's not like I've been there myself, so I'm not one to judge, and I think that makes a huge difference. That when I start working with families, that have been there myself and understand what they're going through. But the bigger thing is that I never, I'm not Dr. Phil. And I never make a farm family feel like that. They just feel like they're dealing with a family friend.
Yeah.
Sometimes, when I meet with a farmer for the first time, there's a lot of times there's been 10 years of stress before that moment. And, we'll just have a beer, right? He'll have a beer or she will have a beer and we just have a beer. I don't drink that much myself, but the thing is I'm not against having a beer with somebody and just making things casual. I found COVID has really taught even the most non-tech savvy farmers how to use Zoom. And basically it's just they put the computer on the kitchen table on a bar stool, and it's really as if I'm there. And what I found is that by me meeting with the family, instead of driving out to the farm and trying to make 10 changes at once, if we can make one improvement in efficiency every meeting and one improvement how the family works together and do that over time, it's not too dramatic changes all at once.
Right.
And more importantly, what I do is I focus on profitability. So each meeting, every partner has to come to the table with an idea to improve farm efficiency by $1,000 without spending $1,000. Wow. So it's got to be a 300% return on investment. Each meeting, if I don't have all the partners, we're not making a $3,000 improvement in your efficiency, your operation. I get guys to pull out $10 and burn $10, right? And you want to see a farmer cry, it's seeing money being burnt, right? But what we do through that process, and that's kind of a window into my how I do accountability within the family operation. But the bigger thing is that the next meeting they'll come to the table with an idea to actually improve efficiency.
Right.
And if you can get not just the son and daughter, but also grandpa to really buy into the process of trying to improve farm efficiency and see the meeting that you have once every 2 weeks as a power hour to actually improve efficiency, it makes it worth everybody's time. More importantly, if we can make one improvement in how the family works together, and you have 25 meetings over the course of a year,
right,
your family operation will be 100 times better. So it's a methodology I've developed so that people don't feel they're being interviewed by Dr. Phil. It's a family friend. Just try and improve farm efficiency and how family works together.
Yeah, I love it. I have one last question for
Sure.
you. I think I know the answer. We've touched on this a bunch of times, but why did God put you on this earth, and what are you here to do with this life?
Well, when I was a kid, I always thought I was farming Bob Cajun.
Mhm.
I mean, I was hell bent to carry on a 7-generation family tradition. Like I said earlier, I mean, I didn't care if you knew my name. I cared about you knowing I was from Bob Cajun. I was going to continue farming the rest of my life in Bob Cajun. But everybody calls me Bob Cajun ever since. But unfortunately, I'm not farming Bob Cajun, and I won't return back to Bob Cajun until my boys spread my ashes. And I think my life purpose is to save as many family farms and help turn stubborn from a bad word to a good word for so many family farms. And I don't know if that's my purpose in life. It's only when I die and I'm in heaven that I'll really have a conversation with God as to whether I achieved what he wanted me to do. But I'm hell bent to turn as many family farms into heaven on earth as I can.
That's awesome. And I'm sure you'll hear, "Well done, my good and faithful servant," at the end of it all.
We'll see when the day comes.
Yeah. So where can people find you?
Just stubborn.farm. So it's
So-
www.stubborn.farm. And if you go there right now, actually, I'll send you an audiobook. I'll actually send you a physical copy of my book, Bulletproof Your Farm, but you can actually just listen to the audiobook version online right now. Just go to stubborn.farm. You can sign up for the masterclass. You can sign up for the book all at the same time and be listening to the audiobook just as you work this afternoon.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Cajun, for joining me today. What a great conversation.
It's great talking to you. It's great talking to a girl from back home.
Yep. And thanks to everyone who's watching or listening. If you want to learn more, as I said, all the links are provided in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe to North American Egg Spotlight on YouTube, Rumble, Telegram, or Egg Fuse. And the podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And have a great day.